the country registered a 6% deficit, roughly. The finance minister a couple of months ago announced a €200 million package to subsidize any rates in energy prices. He recently announced another package to help subsidize the importation and production of goods affected by the Ukraine crisis. How long can the government sustain this practice of subsidy in this current economy?
It's important to protect the consumer as much as possible. I mean, every government wants to do that. The point is, can you afford it? So if you want to discuss, whether we can afford or not, I mean, that would be a separate issue. From an economic point of view, one would also like that the consumer should also have the reality. He must face some reality in the sense of the scarcity of a resource. The price signal is that reality. In other words, it tells him, look, the resource is scarce, please use it economically. So in Europe, they are switching off the heating, this and that. Now, that's not an enjoyable thing to say or to experience, but some signal is still important. So it's a question of the deficit and managing the deficit. At the moment, there are no rules. There is no excessive deficit procedure. So the government, is at liberty to decide what it can afford. But as a past Minister for Finance, I know that you have to look at the future and you don't wait for the rules to start applying. You need to know, to make sure that the reduction in the deficit will be gradual, but it's done as early as one can. So I'm sure that the minister is looking both at trying to protect as much as possible the consumer, but at the same time an eye on the deficit and the future and this future reduction, because it will be, the later we address it, the bigger the challenge.
Federal Reserve and the Bank of England have both raised their interest rates in a bid to try and control the rise in inflation. The ECB has not. Why and how long do you think it can resist doing so?
It's not a question of resisting. I mean, even the Federal Reserve Bank in the United States raised interest rates, but the situations there and in Europe, although there are a lot of similarities, are different. We haven't had Brexit in Europe. In other words, where they have a very tight labour market. And so it's quite unique in the UK. The same in the United States. The 3 trillion of injecting helicopter money, so to speak, also were not repeated in Europe. We had deficits, of course, to try to make up for the devastating effect of the pandemic, but the situation is different. We have now reduced and will be reducing the injection of liquidity, and then by the end of the year, it's a moot point, there's a high probability that we will raise interest rates, at least we'll bring them up from that negative territory where they are at present.